Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for dialing in to today's webinar. My name is Justin Waddell. I help to support our impact management solutions here at Bonterra. And through our impact management solutions, as Ashley mentioned, we help nonprofits and public sector agencies to really transform their approach to case management by providing stronger services, streamlining operations, and better demonstrating the impact of their programs. Now, our impact management webinars are designed to provide you with best practices and insights that you can immediately apply to your work, regardless of where your agency may be in their technology journey. Today, we'll be discussing how public sector agencies can modernize their approach to case management, and we'll be doing so with our in-house expert and senior solutions architect, Chad Trim. So for today's conversation, you can expect Chad and I's discussion to go for about 20 minutes, after which we'll take questions from the audience. Now, if you have questions during our discussion, please type them into the Q&A. We'll address them during that question period. And I really want to ground us by focusing on what we're going to get out of today. And by the end of this discussion, we really hope that you feel more comfortable and confident in how you can approach modernizing your agency's approach to case management. We're really passionate about this topic, and I'm really excited to learn from Chad's experience in today's discussion as we really dive into both what modernizing case management looks like and some of the best practices and next best steps that your agency can take to actually get there. We really want to make sure that you leave this session ready to take action in small and big ways, both today and tomorrow, so that, again, no matter where you are in your technology journey, you feel like you can really put into practice some of those best next steps to modernize what case management looks like for your agency. So with that, I think it's time for us to actually dive in. So I'd like to open with just an introduction to Chad. So Chad, thank you so much for joining us today. I always like to start by learning a little bit more about the experts that we bring in. So could you share a little bit more about your role at Bonterra, your experience in the public sector, and I think most importantly, what brings you to this work?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Justin, for the intro and Ashley for introducing Bonterra. I'm really excited to be talking with you both today, and really excited to just have this conversation for those attending the webinar today. So, as Justin said, my name is Chad. I'm a senior solutions architect here at Bonterra, which just means in my current role, I get to partner with our various different account managers and executives and consultants to show off our various different solution offerings. So webinars are not usually part of my day-to-day work with the organization. Usually I'm spending all day, every day talking to nonprofit organizations and public sector agencies about their data needs and showing off our various different solutions. But occasionally I do get to do these webinars where we're talking more generally and sharing our expertise. So I have been at Bonterra for a little over 6 years now in various different roles. I've been in my current role for a little over 3 years now, but came over from the sales side of things. So my entire time working with the organization, I've been working face to face with organizations like the organizations that are probably represented on the call today. So public sector agencies, nonprofit organizations, really anyone in the public good space. So I came to Bonterra straight out of college, had some nonprofit internship experience in college, namely with the central chapter of the Make-A-Wish Foundation here in Texas, which is what sort of got me interested in the nonprofit and public good sector of things. So had not heard of Social Solutions, which is the legacy company that I came from at the time, but interviewed with them, really liked the mission of the organization and the idea of getting to talk to people who are so passionate about their communities on a day-to-day basis. So in my 6 years, I've worked with tons of different public sector agencies from Arizona DHS to Oklahoma DHS, WorkSource Oregon, California Department of Corrections. Those are just a few of the many organizations that I've worked with in various different capacities here at Bonterra. So yeah, really excited to continue to have this conversation and share what I've learned in the past 6 years of getting to talk with not only those organizations, but also my fellow colleagues, many of whom have come to our organization from the nonprofit and public sector space.
I love it. Yeah, you've got such a diverse experience across the public sector, and I think that's going to be really beneficial to today's conversation. Now, when you and I were first talking about this discussion and thinking through some of the topics that we might cover, like immediately you brought up, oh, we've got to touch on and really focus on modernizing case management, really helping public sector agencies think through exactly what that means and the steps to get there. And I think it's a really important topic. But before we go any further in that, like, let's just set up some definitions. For example, what do you mean by modernize?
Yeah, that's a great question, Justin. So I think that while this isn't a unique problem to the public sector space, we're seeing very similar challenges in the nonprofit world, small businesses in the for-profit sector as well. I do think there are some unique challenges that are posed for the public sector space. But as a whole, what we mean by modernizing the approach to case management is bringing it into the 21st century. So a lot of the organizations that I speak with, whether they're public sector agencies or nonprofit organizations, are behind the times in terms of technology for case management. So it's less about the modes of case management that they're doing, though there may be modes of case management, whether it's the ability to do assessments or the ability to do asynchronous service delivery, that might be hampered by those technology barriers. I think when we talk about modernizing case management, a lot of it comes back to the technology that those agencies and organizations are using as a means to collect the information on whatever populations they are working with. So the number one solution that our current clients are coming to us from is spreadsheets. Now, you may not have intuitively guessed that, and that wasn't the case for me either when I first joined this organization. I was super focused on learning all about our competitors in the space, only to realize that our main competitor is spreadsheets. Most organizations, from your smallest grassroots nonprofit organization all the way to top level federal agencies, are often stuck utilizing pen and paper or some sort of spreadsheet method of tracking their case management. That, as you probably assume, is not a super modernized way of doing case management. While many agencies that we speak to do have someone in-house that is an expert in Excel or Google Suite, there's only so much that you can do with those platforms. So modernizing really means working smarter, not harder. Having some sort of system that is working for you, not the other way around. I lose track of how many agencies that I talk to that are working off of spreadsheets and do have someone in-house that can manipulate those well. But what happens when that person leaves that organization, leaving that agency completely helpless in terms of manipulating those complex spreadsheets that they've built? So modernizing in terms of tech can take a ton of different forms. Just some examples that our solutions have, but I know are available in many other solutions, are things like self-service tools. So allowing for more asynchronous service delivery between case managers and their clients. Things like automated alerts that ensure that tasks and clients themselves are not slipping through the cracks of your service delivery. This could also include things like mobile messaging that takes communication into the 21st century, and a lot of other things that I think we'll get into discussing a lot more in this conversation today. So that's really what I mean when I talk about modernizing approach to case management. So not only the methods, but also the ways in which that is being tracked from a technological standpoint.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know we've all been there with regards to spreadsheets and our in-house experts with spreadsheets who
Yeah.
are so good at them, but then inevitably you run into like version control issues, compliance issues, etc. So yeah, they can definitely only take you so far, but I have leaned on them a time or two in my career. Okay,
Yeah, and I think
that
that
makes
the
sense.
thing that gets highlighted by so many of our current customers coming from spreadsheets is that if you're on this call today and spreadsheets is your method for tracking your case management, just know that you're not alone. We're not here to shame you for doing that at all. Most organizations are utilizing some form of spreadsheets or even behind the curve. I mean, you'd be shocked how many organizations in the past 6 years I've talked to that have some sort of paper trail or sticky note method, and aren't even utilizing something as low tech as spreadsheets.
No, no, truth. Okay, so there are obviously challenges like spreadsheets and the types of tools that you use. But going beyond that, when we think about modernizing and I guess the imperative or like the real reason to modernize, there have to be like, key challenges that are motivating organizations and agencies to do so. In your mind, what are these key challenges that agencies are facing today? And then as a follow-up, like how unique are these challenges to today's environment versus just something that the public sector is always having to contend with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, starting with one that I do think is unique to today's environment, funders, not only funders, but also the public is requiring so much more of agencies in terms of proof of outcomes. And the reason for that is that there are so many organizations, whether it's public sector agencies or nonprofit organizations. And while that really seems like a good thing, that there are a ton of people that are passionate about helping their communities, that means that the resources are constantly being competed for by various different agencies. The increase in funding has not matched the increase in organizations or the increase in need in the communities that we're seeing. So, because of that, funders are starting to require so much more. And I do think that a unique challenge for the public sector is that they're not only having to worry about funders, but they're also having to worry about the public at large, taxpayers who have some sort of, obviously through taxes, a stake in the game. Whereas nonprofit organizations, I may only really care about the outcomes of an organization that I'm directly donating to. All of the agencies in my community, I'm inadvertently donating to through my tax dollars. So even as someone that's just a general member of the public, I want to know how those agencies are utilizing my tax dollars. So I do think that that's something that's we're only seeing increase is the requirement of those organizations. And spreadsheets and low tech solutions can accomplish some level of proving outcomes, but a lot of times there's so much admin time required. Another thing that I see as a big challenge is top-down problems. So there's so much bureaucracy involved in even just the decision-making process in the public sector space, whether it's mandated systems that state and federal governments are requiring agencies to use, or even just the RFP process that is often required to even look into purchasing a solution like we offer here at Bonterra. So a lot of those we understand are not your agency's fault. It may be coming from orders that are above your pay grade or above your level of expertise. So past those top-down challenges and the funders and public requiring more proof, another huge detractor for that modernization that we see are internal challenges as well. So we'll cover these a little bit more in depth, I think, as we go along in the conversation, but these might include there not being a single source of truth or purpose-built system internally. It could be administrative or IT burdens or interoperability of systems and even just lack of flexibility. So things are constantly changing in the public good space. A lot of organizations are using antiquated systems that require a ton of technological expertise to make any sort of little changes to. Does that answer your question, Justin?
Definitely. That's really helpful.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So we focused a lot on, I think, some of the challenges and hurdles that agencies are currently working against. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, the more positive outcomes that can come from modernizing your approach to case management. I think one of the ones that you hear a lot about is increasing efficiency. Whether it's with Bonterra or another solution, you're able to increase efficiency for your organization. But that's kind of an ambiguous concept, kind of like
Yeah.
modernizing case management at the beginning. Can you help us like break down what increasing efficiency actually means and how agencies would see that manifest
Yeah.
within their teams?
Yeah, absolutely, Justin. And I think you hit the nail on the head in that it is sort of a nebulous concept, and efficiency measurements are going to differ naturally agency to agency based on the populations that they're serving, based on funder requirements, etc. But I'd say that the number one thing that we see and hear from agencies that across the board is a difference maker is the amount of time that they get to spend on whatever they got into this work to do. So efficiency means spending one-on-one time with clients. It means being able to dream and envision launching new programs, or even just looking at current programs and using data to see what is working and what is not. Those are things that I see as being a huge benefit of increased efficiency. Having more time for those sort of things and less time spent on things like administrative burdens, whether that's inputting data, synthesizing data into reports, building reports and outcomes trackers for funders and things like that. So it's less on the admin side of things. Think the things that you do when you're sitting at your desk after hours, oftentimes not meeting face to face with one of your direct service recipients, and really increasing the amount of time that you are able to do spending with those people. So for some agencies, that might just mean increased time spent with their direct service recipients. For other agencies, it might mean the same amount of time per recipient, but being able to serve more clients without having to hire additional staff because the staff that are there aren't focusing less on that admin burden of inputting data and things like that, and more on the, again, work that you all got into this to do. Now, there might be some of you coming from an IT space that you really did get into this work for synthesizing data, but I imagine the majority of you got into this work for those face-to-face direct service interactions with whatever populations you're serving.
Hmm. That makes sense. And so increasing efficiency really seems to be grounded in, I think, both time savings and capacity increase. Do you recommend before an agency embarks on this journey that they get a really good grip of just how much time it currently is taking? Because I could see like you making process changes or technology changes, and if you haven't done the benchmarking, maybe it's hard to actually see the gains. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, no, Justin, I definitely think that that is for sure a useful thing to do. And not just for internal due diligence. It's definitely helpful to be able to see, especially if you all are the ones making this investment, being able to see the change that increased efficiency really does. But even past just for internal usages, that sort of thing is huge for being able to justify to funders technology purchase or something like that. So most of the organizations that are coming to us are probably wanting to make that decision, but obviously have some sort of financial barrier, whether it's a board that doesn't necessarily think that they need a new system, or they're having to go to RFP or seek grant funding or something like that. So being able to really categorize and put numbers to that efficiency piece can be a huge proof point for investing in tools that make those processes more efficient. So I definitely think that that is something that would be useful.
Okay. That's good to know. And then I think building on that, we can talk a little bit about implementation. Whenever we're talking about tech, I'm always wary of tech being a silver bullet. Like you really have to have process in place in order for the tech to actually move forward your organization in a meaningful
Yeah.
way. When you think about the implementation and some of the both challenges and opportunities when it comes to increasing efficiency, for example, what are some of the flags that you'd offer to agencies as they begin to consider these next steps?
Yeah, so I think that staff buy-in is obviously huge. So if there is one champion at the organization of making some sort of change, whether it's technological or process or really anything, and no one else is on board, a lot of times those sort of changes are then going to be DOA. There's so many times that I've talked to one person within an agency or nonprofit organization that is so convinced and passionate about moving forward with one of our solutions, moving away from something else or a spreadsheet. And it just goes nowhere if there's not buy-in from not only other staff, but leadership as well. And that's a common thing that we see as well, a misconception of, okay, I just need to get leadership's approval for this sort of thing or financial approval. But if you're not going to get buy-in from the people who are actually implementing those new processes, again, whether it be a technology change or a change in the type of assessments that you're doing or workflow of clients through a program, if you're not getting buy-in from the direct workers, the frontline staff, a lot of times these process changes, again, are not going to make it past home plate. So yeah, I think there's a number of different things that we could talk about in terms of that, but from my experience, that is the biggest detractor that I see is not getting buy-in from everyone necessary for not only making a change initially, but making sure that that change sticks and really avoiding the challenges that we often see that come with change management within an organization.
Yeah, I like that you brought up making sure that change sticks. As you transition from like initial implementation and adoption to sustained use, do you have any advice or anything that you've seen that lends itself well to agencies really thriving with their new processes and programs?
That's a great question. I think it really is buy-in from staff. So not only in the beginning, but then ongoing, making sure that staff get the training for implementing new processes necessary. There's nothing worse, and I feel this often internally. If like a new internal system gets rolled out, even to a for-profit agency, and they talk a ton about that new system, but then there's no training on how to utilize it. I might utilize it for a week or two and then completely abandon it until someone gets on my back about having to utilize it. You see the same thing in public sector agencies and nonprofit organizations. If staff don't get the proper training for those systems, then a lot of times they're just going to revert back to their old ways of tracking data or client management and things like that. And a lot of times it's not just out of laziness or being stubborn. A lot of times it's just they're already so overwhelmed with the day-to-day work that they're doing that they don't have the time to on their own train themselves to utilize a new system. So I think that leader-led training is something that's really important for that continued adoption of process changes.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. Okay. Well, so let's say we do all this stuff. You choose a new solution, whatever it might be. You implement new processes. You get all this going. You're increasing efficiency, giving time back, increasing capacity. All of this should ideally lead to improved outcomes for your programs. And because of that, improved outcomes for the communities that you're serving. And with that, I'd like to pivot the conversation to a discussion of those outcomes. I think a lot of agencies can sometimes struggle with outcomes validation and really doing that in a meaningful way, both to improve their programs and also improve the outcomes for those they serve. Can you talk through some of what you see agencies getting wrong and right when it comes to how they manage outcomes validation and impact reporting?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that uh, a lot of what organizations get wrong is a focus on outputs. So a lot of agencies, especially if you're stuck utilizing low tech solutions like pen and paper or spreadsheets, is that they're purely focused on outputs. And by what we mean by outputs is basic counts of things. How many people did we serve in total this year? How many people in various different demographic groups did we serve this year? How many of XYZ service did we administer? How much total time did we spend with clients this year? I'm definitely not saying that those are things that organizations shouldn't track, but those are the baseline of what organizations need to be tracking. What we want to empower organizations to move towards is outcomes rather than just outputs. Because think about yourselves, if you all are donating to a nonprofit organization and there's two organizations in your community that do extremely similar things, maybe they're working with at-risk youth in your community. One organization sends out their quarterly update, and it shows that they've served 15 youth. They've spent 30 minutes a week with each of those youth, and they've administered 12 ACT prep classes for those various different youth across that quarter. Now, those are really awesome statistics, but if I'm comparing that with organization B, who has all of those same statistics, but are also making it more real for me, they're saying that, okay, we served all these youth, we actually got two of these youth into community college uh, as a direct result of the services and programs that we were offering to those youth. Not only did we do that this year, but we actually found out that this quarter, three of our youth who are alumni from 5 years ago, they're actually in full-time jobs and have college graduation on their resume. I'm probably going to donate to that organization that not only tells me all of their outputs, but also their outcomes as well. So I think that that's one of the biggest things that we see with organizations is being a little bit too focused on the outputs and not enough oftentimes on the outcomes. And oftentimes, Justin, we see that that's not a fault of the organization. It's just hard to track those outcomes without a modernization of technology. Something that I think that agencies get right about that sort of thing, though, is defining what those outcomes are. So many organizations and agencies that I talk to, it is just a technology barrier. It's not that they don't have those outcomes defined as an organization. They can rattle those off to me extremely easily. And I think that that's something that we're seeing as funders are acquiring more and more information. Organizations are utilizing that as the first step because that oftentimes does need to be the first step. A tool like ours or another more modern case management tool is not of a ton of use if you're just going to be utilizing that to also track outputs. So a lot of times the first steps is for those agencies to define what success looks like for their programs and services.
Yeah, yeah, you really have to lay the foundation of the, I guess, the story of the impact that you're really
Yes.
trying to drive. And to that point, I think we oftentimes have a bias towards quantitative data when it comes to outcomes and impact reporting. But I think there's probably also a serious role for qualitative data there. What are your
Absolutely.
thoughts on qualitative data and how that fits in and how folks should think about collecting that in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great question too, Justin. And I think that those really go hand in hand. So if I'm thinking about a nonprofit organization or a public sector agency's year-end review that they're sending out to their funders or stakeholders, I don't think one or the other solely focused on is going to have the same impact as side by side. If I'm purely focusing on statistics, there's not that human element that is included there. And vice versa. If I'm solely focusing on case studies and examples of youth that we've helped, using that example again, but I've got no statistics to back that up, maybe the more statistic and money conscious donors or funders aren't going to see that proof. So I think that they really need to go hand in hand, and that one is not more important than the other. I think you're right that we do sometimes get caught up, especially in the tech space, thinking more about the quantitative and less on the qualitative. But again, I think they feed each other in a very symbiotic way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Well, this has been a really helpful discussion. I've really enjoyed this. I hope the audience has as well. Before we hand it over to Q&A, is there any final guidance that you'd want to offer public sector leaders who are thinking about trying to modernize their approach to case management?
Yeah, I think especially in the public sector space, from the organizations that I talk to, there's a lot of frustration around those top-down barriers. And working in the public sector space for the past 25 years as an organization, we hear you and we understand that oftentimes modernization of case management isn't just something that you all are internally refusing to do. A lot of times it does come from those top-down mandated solutions, cumbersome RFP processes and things like that. So I think the final thing that I would want to leave leaders with is just a little bit of grace to those organizations. Give the grace to yourself as well. We understand that you all are working in an extremely hard environment now, from a funding perspective, from a mental health perspective, just from a world perspective. And we thank you all for doing the work that you're doing. Keep going and stay positive in that work that you're doing. And even when those barriers present themselves internally or from the top down, we just want to continue encouraging you all and know that organizations like ours are here to support you at the end of the day.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chad, for your insight and your experience working with public agencies and their approach, excuse me, to case management. Really appreciate it. I want to turn this over to Q&A. We had some really good questions come in. So it looks like the first one came from Mia, who asked, how does a solution like Bonterra actually support all of this? How does it actually support the effort to modernizing your case management?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of what our system does is increase that efficiency piece. So being able to spend more time with your clients because you have a system that's working for you. Just a few examples of that include self-service tools. Those are the parts of the system that I love showing off the most, because it cuts down on the amount of time that you're having to spend inputting data and increasing the amount of ability that you have for either your clients themselves to self-refer or partner agencies in your community to do referrals directly into your system. So those might include things like front-facing intake forms that someone can fill out on your website, and it automatically creates a participant profile in your tool for them. Things like ongoing connect accounts that allow you to communicate with your participants on a more ongoing basis. As you can imagine, that really took off during COVID, but a lot of organizations that we work with have continued to utilize that tool to provide asynchronous service delivery. So those are just a few of the examples of the ways in which technologies like ours can increase those efficiencies internally.
Wonderful. We also had a question come in from Emily, who asked, when thinking about kind of modernizing your agency's approach to case management, who might be some of the key stakeholders that typically need to kind of be involved in that decision, in that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most commonly we see program managers. So sort of that middle management, those are usually the people who are sort of first engaging with us on a tool like this. They're usually the ones that maybe came from another agency that utilized a system like this, or they're able to see the burden that it's putting on their frontline staff workers from a macro perspective if they're not necessarily in the trenches on a day-to-day basis. So I'd say that usually they're the ones that are initially coming to us. But I definitely encourage upper level and lower level involvement as well. As I mentioned earlier, there's no use in purchasing technology that your frontline staff workers are not going to utilize. They're generally the ones that are going to be using this most on a day-to-day basis. So you want them involved in that initial process as well. Same thing with decision makers at the top. I cannot tell you how many times I've talked to organizations that have gotten frontline staff buy-in, program manager level buy-in, but never brought in upper management and the decision makers into the process early, and then went through all of this process of getting really excited about a system, only for it to be shut down by upper management, not because they didn't see the value of the system, but just because they were never part of those conversations, able to really see the value.
Definitely important to get those people involved in that decision making, and so that they can see the value for sure. One of the last questions that we have here so far is from Eric, and Eric asks, what is one thing that an agency can do today to start modernizing their approach?
Yeah, that is a really great question. So I think obviously some of these things are going to be difficult without a tool, but something that I have seen other organizations utilize is some level of self-service. So even if you can get your internal staff and your constituents used to interacting with you from an asynchronous perspective, whether it's utilizing Jot forms or Google Forms or some sort of free resource, I think that that can be a great way to start that modernization of your case management, even without a more robust tool like ours.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, folks on the call, I want to say that if you are interested in kind of learning more about Bonterra, specifically in some ways that we might be able to help you all modernize that approach, I want to launch another quick poll here. Again, feel free to fill that out. We will have one of our colleagues reach out to you after today's session to kind of initiate that conversation, answer any questions you might have, like I said. But I want to give folks a couple seconds here to leave any last minute questions. But while they do that, thank you, Chad, again, so much for sharing your experience and your expertise with us today. And a big thank you to you, the audience, of course, for joining us today on how public agencies can modernize their approach to case management. We really appreciate you all signing in. And we hope that you've learned some insights, some new insights that you can incorporate to your work, take back to your work and your colleagues. So with that, while folks are filling that out, I want to just also shout out some of our other webinars that we have. We want to see you at the next one, of course. We hope to see you there. And yeah, we appreciate your time and your engagement this afternoon, definitely.